Dear friends, disciples, and devotees, today our reading for October 9th is The Mother's Force, Part 1. You have asked me during this period of COVID-19 to read things that may be helpful during this challenging time. So I have chosen for this week and next week, The Mother's Force. We begin. Disciple. There are some people here who remain constantly in despair and gloom because they have become conscious of their minutest imperfections, but they are unable to get rid of them. Sri Aurobindo. They are unable for two reasons. One, because they yield to despair and gloom and the illusion of impotence. Two, because they try only with their own strength and do not care or know how to call in the working of the Mother's force. Disciple. Sometimes I feel a thick wall between me and the divine. At other times there is a pressure on me, and I feel quietude come into me. Sri Aurobindo. Persevere in spite of the fluctuations. The Mother's force is at work all the time, even when the thick wall is there, so that there may be no wall in future. Disciple. You have written that the force is there. Why then do I not feel it, except for a short time after pranam? Formerly I felt that the force above was doing the sadhana. Why do I not feel it now? Sri Aurobindo. The Mother's force is not only above on the summit of the being. It is there with you and near you, ready to act whenever your nature will allow it. It is so with everybody here. Always keep open to the Mother's force. Let the inner consciousness develop. Only that will help and deliver from all difficulties as the openness in the physical grows in you. As she told you, your concentration should be in the heart center, and all the rest, the rising above, the head, etc., should come of itself in the natural process of the sadhana. Through the heart, you will get the closer and closer touch of the Mother and the working of her force in the whole being. It has to be done by the working of the Mother's force, aided by your aspiration, devotion, and surrender. If everybody were containing the constant action of the Mother's force, the sadhana would be finished by now, and the siddhi complete. Let nothing and nobody come between you and the Mother's force. It is on your admitting and keeping that force and responding to the true inspiration and not on any ideas the mind may form that success will depend. Even ideas or plans which might otherwise be useful will fail if there is not behind them the true spirit and the true force and influence. When I speak of the mother's force, I do not speak of the force of Prakriti, which carries on things in the ignorance, but of the higher force of the divine that descends from above to transform the nature. Disciple, you often speak of the mother's force. What is it? Sri Aurobindo. It is the divine force, which works to remove the ignorance and change the nature into the divine nature. It is not necessary to ask for power. It is the mother's force that must work in the being, and if it is there, all necessary power will come. Disciple, when a sadhak works with the right attitude and the higher force acts in him directly, how does the force work to purify or remove his defects and imperfections? Sri Aurobindo. It acts by awakening the inner consciousness gradually or swiftly, by replacing the principle of ego service by the principle of service of the divine, by making him watch his actions and see his own defects, and pushing him to rectify them, by establishing a connection between his consciousness and the mother's consciousness, by preparing his nature to be taken up more and more by the mother's consciousness and force, by giving him experiences which make him ready for the major experiences of yoga, by stimulating the growth of his psychic being, by opening him to the mother as the universal being, etc., etc. Naturally, it acts differently in different persons. You should not rely on anything else alone, however helpful it may seem, but chiefly, primarily, fundamentally, on the mother's force. The sun and the light may be a help, and it will be if it is the true light and the true sun, but cannot take the place of the mother's force. But whether the progress is rapid or slow, the attitude should always be an entire faith and reliance on the mother. Just as you do not think that the progress was the result of your own effort or merit, but of your taking the right attitude of reliance and the mother's force working, so you should not think that any slowness or difficulty was due to your own demerit, but only seek to keep this attitude of reliance and let the mother's force work. Slowly or rapidly does not matter. Keep the reliance steady in your heart, and do not allow self-distrust, depression, or sadness to invade you from outside. There are two ways of doing yoga. One by knowledge and one's own efforts. The other by reliance on the mother. In the last way, one has to offer one's mind and heart and all to the mother for her force to work on it. Call her in all difficulties. Have faith and bhakti. At first, it takes time, often a long time, for the consciousness to be prepared in this way. And during that time, many difficulties can come up. But if one perseveres, a time comes when all is ready. The mother's force opens the consciousness fully to the divine. Then all that must develop develops within. Spiritual experience comes, and with it, the knowledge and union with the divine. Namaste.